Many congratulations to the top three finishers of the FIA Formula One Bahrain Grand Prix. Finishing in third place, Carlos Sainz. In second place, Sergio Perez, and taking win number 55 of his Formula One career and his second in a row here in Bahrain. Our winner, Max Verstappen. Well, Max, first race of the season, your first win of the season. Was progress on track as straightforward as it looked?
I think today was probably better than expected. The thing that changed was the wind and the intensity of it. So, it just clicked a bit better. I just had a better feeling with the car, and I could look after my tires quite well at the same time. So that was very positive. Probably a bit more how it was in testing as well. I just felt very comfortable with the car, and that really showed today. So very happy to kickstart the season like this, but also as a team, to have a 1-2 is just fantastic. But I also think that in general, other teams are closer. I just think that today everything just worked really, really well, and I of course don't expect that to happen every single Grand Prix in the near future. So, but still, we take it. We look back at it. Of course, we analyze it, and we'll try to improve further.
George Russell said after qualifying yesterday he thought you had half a second a lap over everybody else. Just what did you make of the gap to everyone?
Of course, I don't know how they approach their long runs, with fuel loads and whatever. But from our side, it was definitely not expected to be a half a second ahead, for sure not. But it was probably a bit better than I thought today.
And you say the car feels more like it was in testing. Is it still a bit of a relief to come out of the first race, having had the domination that you have? But also at the same time, you could see in qualifying it was very tight, and there are things that we can do better, and that's what we'll focus on, for the coming races. Well, let's throw it forward to the next race. How much confidence do you have going into Saudi Arabia?
Yeah, it's a completely different track layout, a lot more high-speed corners. The tarmac, of course, completely different to what it is here, so less degradation. Naturally, probably that will help other teams as well compared to us. It seems like for us always it's better to have these kind of tracks. So I don't expect that to be easy.
All right, well, very well done today. Thank you, Max. Checo, coming to you. Great race from fifth on the grid. Just how satisfied are you with your progress?
Yeah, I think starting from P5, it's always nice to make good progress. There was a lot of battles on track, which around this place is you just go into a very different strategy once that happens. You are sliding a lot more on traffic, and I think overall it's a very good team result. He was quite close with the Ferraris, with the Mercs early on. We were fighting with the DRS, obviously being a lap earlier. It just changes a few things out there.
And you were on the soft tyre in that final stint. You had Carlos just behind on the hard tyre. Were you concerned going into that stage of the race?
Yeah, I knew that it was just about managing, because he obviously pushed us to stop early, and we just stopped quite early actually. And it was going to be a very long stint, so we managed to progressively build a gap, keep that gap between us consistent, and I think it worked well. We had few other issues with the car towards the end of the race that meant that our degradation was getting quite a lot worse towards the end of the race.
Even without that degradation, just how comfortable are you in the RB20?
Yeah, I think today was a very nice surprise. We were expecting definitely the people around us to be a lot stronger. I think, like Max says, this is a very high. This is probably the worst place for degradation. So I think the better it is, the closer it will get. So Jeddah will be a very different challenges. So it will be interesting to see where we are there.
How much are you looking forward to Jeddah, of course, seen of your victory there last year?
Yeah, a lot, I think also I believe that the car will be strong there with the high-speed content. So I think it should be another strong weekend for us.
All right, well done today. Thank you, Checo. Carlos, coming to you now. Fourth in the opening race last year, third this year. Given everything that's happened to you over the winter, just how important is this podium?
I think it's just important to start the season well, start the season with a strong race, just not for my future, just for myself, because last year I spent a lot of the races, looking in my mirror, saving tires, defending my position. And I remember at the car launch saying, yeah, this year I wish we had a car to go racing, and attack people and don't care too much about the tires and make some overtaking moves and look forward rather than look backwards. And it's exactly what we got. I got an attacking race, a really good race pace, and from there everything felt really good to finish P3. It wasn't a straightforward and an easy race, but I enjoyed it a lot.
It was a very clean race for you. Did you have any of the braking issues that Charles had?
Yes, the first stint and the beginning of the second stint, whenever we were in traffic, we were having a lot of brake vibrations, and the pedal at one point started to go long. So it was always a balancing act between, do I go for it and try to get rid of the dirty air and overtake people, or do I start saving my brakes because they're going to fail or something's going to happen? I started saving by moving a bit on the straight to cool the side that it was getting hotter, and the vibration started to get better, and then I could start to make moves and move forward. But as I said, the start wasn't great. The brakes were still a bit of a limitation for a bit, and then once everything settled, I could do my pace, do my overtakes, and go for the podium.
Tell us more about those overtakes, and specifically the ones on Charles Leclerc, because from outside the car it looked very close. How did they feel inside the car?
It never felt close inside the car. Whenever I do a overtake on my teammate, I will always try and leave as much margin as possible, and I try and do it whenever I feel like I'm fully under control and I'm not putting any car at risk. And that's exactly what I did. I felt like a very good moves, and always keeping an eye on Charles and not making him also lose time or anything like that.
And just give us your thoughts on that final stint. We heard from Checo about him being on the soft, you being on the hard. What were you feeling at that moment in the race? Did you think P2 was on?
You guys need to consider that we've been testing here 3 days, and I've been seeing that Red Bull degradation on soft, and it's exactly the same as ours on the hard. So as soon as I knew Red Bull had a new soft for the last stint, and Checo had it, it's not like I went, okay, this is my chance. I've seen the long runs they did on this C3 tire, soft tire in testing, and you could see that they basically have the same deck on the soft than what everyone has on the hard. So I wasn't getting too excited. Also, I was a bit of an uncomfortable position, because you're there in the 2-3 second margin, where you get all the dirty air, but you don't get the advantage of the DRS and the slipstream, so you're just sliding a bit more. If I would have been within a second or maybe 5 seconds behind, I think on the hard tire I could have maybe showed a bit more the true pace of the car and my pace today, but in that 2-3 seconds is the worst place to be, and I could never mount any proper challenge on Checo today.
Carlos, you've talked about Red Bull's deg on the soft tyre. Are you surprised by their overall pace in the race? Has it come as a surprise?
Again, no. When I saw the long runs of Max and Checo on FP2 and then the long runs of testing, there's no secrets. We've been here 3 days. I knew they had a 3-4 advantage, maybe not half a second like George was saying, depending on track conditions. But I knew it was going to be very difficult to beat the Red Bulls. They also kept a new soft, which shows a bit what the intentions and their plans were. So I knew the Red Bulls today were going to be very, very difficult to beat. So to keep up with one of them and have the possibility to fight is already a good surprise. I think we're at one of their strongest tracks of the season, with very high tire deck at the rear. Hopefully when we go to a more front limited track and maybe better tarmac, our car will come alive and we will be able to mount a better challenge on Max for the win.
Thank you, Carlos, and well done today. Let's open this to the floor. Name and publication, please. Who's first?
Jesus Balseiro, Diario AS. Question for Carlos. After 1 year being quite defensive, how does it feel to be that aggressive again, to show the people that and the team bosses that you're still a very aggressive driver that can perform those kind of overtakes?
Yeah, it's actually a bit of a relief, because I remember last year the last race where I was attacking was Austria, and we're talking about 13, 14 races ago. And then the rest of the races last year, you just had to manage, you just had to look in the mirrors, you just had to control your pace, and there were very little opportunities to go and overtake people, you know. And I love going racing, and I love going overtaking, being aggressive, attacking. And with last year's car, it was simply impossible to do that. As soon as we were in dirty air, as soon as we overheated the tires, as soon as we pushed a bit too much, it was game over. And this year, come to the most real limited track of the season, the highest degradation, and do a overtaking, attacking race, for me is a relief, and it gives me a feeling that we will be able to do this more often this year. It doesn't mean we will do it every race at all, because I still think one of our strongest parts of our car is qualifying, so I think we will still qualify maybe ahead of what maybe our true position is, but at least we're not degrading and defending like crazy like we were doing last year.
Thank you, Carlos. Next one.
Ronald Vording, motorsport.com. Question to Max. If you compare the tight qualifying yesterday to today's dominance, is that mainly due to the conditions you talked about, or is it also with the new Red Bull concept still the case that the Red Bull car is just way stronger in the race than in qualifying? And if that's the case, is it something you pay more attention to with your setup choices, or is it just natural to the Red Bull cars?
Yeah, I do think that we are just not that great on one lap performance for whatever reason with the car. But luckily it's very good in the race for most tracks. Next year, of course, you focus a little bit more on the race, but yeah, it just seems like other teams can maybe extract a little bit more over one lap than us for whatever reason. So that's what we'll look at for the coming races. But yeah, I really think that also just the circumstances today with the wind helped us out a bit more compared to the last 2 days, where probably it was not in our favor with how the car is responding at the moment.
Thank you, Max. Next one.
Another question for Max. Max, you overlapped half the grid today. What kind of a season do we expect from you? Is it breaking more records, or do you really expect for there to be a fight at some point of the season? Or is it going to be just straightforward, another one like last year in your case?
Well, I don't really think about that. You know, I go race by race because there are so many different scenarios, and this is a very particular track as well. Probably one of our strongest anyway. So I don't want to think about these kind of things yet. I just want to now focus on what to improve from this race onwards, and then look at Jeddah, how we prepare there. But I'm not looking ahead too much.
Thank you, Max. Yep.
Jay Balls, Leg Autosport. Question for both Max and Checo, please. Just on that extra set of soft tyres that you had in the race, given the degradation around here, did it kind of seem like a little bit of a risk for you when the strategy was first presented to you, or were you just kind of super confident that you kind of had it all in the bag? Thank you.
No, from my side, it was quite clear after testing and also practice that we needed to do what we did, with the soft being a good tyre and the hard being the hard. So never big question marks, to be honest.
Yeah, it was straightforward. I think the hard is just not performing as well with as with the other teams, and we seem to be better looking after the soft, so it worked really well to be able to save a new soft.
Thanks both. Okay. Yep.
Marco Canseco de Marca. From outside, for Carlos, the question. From outside, it seems that Ferrari tried to undercut against you. Is the case?
And I don't think it was an intended undercut. I think Charles degraded the tires probably a bit earlier than me, and they decided to keep me out for 3 or 4 laps. Honestly, those 3 or 4 laps were very strong. I think I managed to go down to 37s, low 37s again. So it was worth it. And then, yeah, luckily it didn't compromise my race because I could pass Charles fairly quickly and go and attack George, which I passed also quite quickly. So I don't think I lost too much race time on that situation.
Thank you. Any more? Yep.
Taylor Powell in Motorsport Monday. Sergio, you said yesterday that you expected following another car to be tougher this season. Question to both you and Carlos. Was that the case today? And to Max, what did you make of DRS being activated after lap 1? Is that something you agree with? And did you have it in mind before the race? Thanks.
I think it definitely changes the way you race, and especially with the cars around you. When you are in a fight and straight away you get DRS. Like I saw Carlos, he lost DRS early on and he was just out of contention for a while. And the car ahead going straight into the clean air, it's basically going on his own. It has to use more of his tires. So it's a bit of a disadvantage if you are fighting, I think, in places like Baku or even Jeddah, having that sort of... I think the racing is going to be different. It does create a difference to the car ahead in the first few laps. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think the whole first stint between Mercedes, Ferrari, and myself was very racy throughout. So I think that change in DRS is making a difference.
Yeah, I think a lot of strategy comes into play. Especially with how sensitive the tires are to pushing. So on one side you want to push to get out of DRS or to get into DRS, and then on the other hand you want to save tires because we all know how sensitive the tires are in the first few laps to pushing. So it's a very fine line. I elected to, as soon as I saw I didn't have pressure from behind, I decided to manage my tires, and it paid off instead of getting into the DRS battle. So, and then I could overtake them no problem. And yeah, it's going to be track dependent. It's going to be, I think, a very tricky season going 24 races like that. We had it on the sprints last year, so yeah, it's going to be a challenge, but another interesting thing to think about.
And Max?
Yeah, I mean, also from my side, knowing how much to push or not, I think the first lap Charles was in the DRS, or like at least once. But yeah, you want to push, but then to save your tires, so it's making that decision. But for sure, on some tracks it will be quite tricky because the DRS can be very powerful. So it might create some, let's say, interesting battles or situations.
Thanks all. Okay, another one.
Marijn Abbenhuis, AD Sportwereld. Question for Max. Right after the race, you said it was a special day today because it's not often as perfect as it was today, but we've seen you dominating pretty much every race since a long time. What made today even better than most of the already very good races you had last years?
I think today everything just went really well. The balance, the feeling for myself in the car. And that is not always like that. I mean, sometimes you win races, but you're maybe not very happy with how you were feeling with the car or the balance of the car. But yeah, today that was all very good.
Thank you. Yep, another one.
Sönke Sievers, FAZ. Question to Carlos and Max, please. What do you think how much locked in is the advantage of Red Bull at this moment? Will anyone even be able to catch them until we get a new rule set in 2026? Thank you.
I think the advantage of Red Bull is in Bahrain is what you saw today, very, very clearly. I think it's interesting how they can keep the C3 soft tire alive for a bit longer than the rest, how they tend to overheat a bit less. Maybe that's what makes the car also not as competitive in quali and so good on the race in a track like Bahrain. Now we need more samples, but I expect Red Bull always to be better in the race like they were last year. Look at the last 8 races. Between Charles and me, we managed to do some pole positions, a lot of front rows, but then Max in the race was pulling away massively, and Checo was always able to overtake us. So yeah, I hope that this year's trade is not as exaggerated, and we've done a good step forward in that sense, which already I felt today. But they are still ahead, so now it's time to get our heads down and start developing this car to keep closing the gap in the race.
Max, anything to
Yeah, I mean, this weekend, of course, I think in the race we're still very strong. But if you look at qualifying, I of course put it on pole. But the fast lap was done in Q2 by Charles, So over one lap, I don't think it's that straightforward. And every track is different. So maybe we rock up in Jeddah and you have a different feeling. And naturally, on tracks with lower degradation, teams will be closer. And luckily we don't have too many Singapores on the calendar. Otherwise, it might be a bit of a struggle for us. But let's see this year if it's a bit better on street circuits as well.
Thank you. Another one.
A question for Carlos. Carlos Charles mentioned in the in the media pen that there was the front brakes were overheating. Was this a problem that you discovered in pre-season testing, or has it just come up this weekend? And did you have the same severity to?
Yeah, I don't know the level of severity he had, but for me it was at one point pretty bad too. It's something that you cannot discover in testing, because in testing you never put yourself in 10 laps consecutive behind 4 cars, getting all the hot air from the 4 cars in front, and the brakes never cool down. I try not to panic. I try to put the side that was more heated, and I took a different line on the straights to cool them down. And yeah, at one point the pedal started to go quite long, and also a lot of brake vibrations, which changes your feeling and the braking quite a lot. But yeah, I kept it cool, managed them, and as soon as I got a bit of clean air, it cleared and it became a lot better. But it's something that we definitely maybe need to take a bit more margin going into the next few races.
Thank you. And another one.
Ronald Vording, motorsport.com. Question to Max and Checo. Obviously, Red Bull is running a slightly new car concept this year. Purely as a driver, if you compare the new concept to the RB19, is it giving you as a driver and in terms of driving style any different feelings than the RB19, or is it all very similar? And secondly, it's still kind of a relief to see that this new concept is working flawless, basically, because some other teams on the grid could not make different car concepts work. Thank you.
I think the feeling in the car is pretty similar, just a little bit better. I think that is, what we really wanted. I mean, last year's car was already very good, with some tiny improvements here and there. I think especially also a bit more low speed. The car just feels a bit better. But overall, when I jumped in, it didn't feel like a completely different car to drive or whatever. So that was positive. And for sure, it's always a little bit of maybe for me more than the team, a question mark. Like if you look at the car, you're like, oh, is this going to work? But clearly, they have done their homework. They trust all the simulations and also the wind tunnel, and it has shown the last few years, that they have been very good at it.
Yeah, I think it was definitely a risk, to change the concept, but everything has been working. The car is very similar to. Balance-wise to what we have last year. It's just like Max says, just better in all regards. But I think we're still learning of our new car, like everyone is. So I think when we take it to very different circuits, we're gonna be learning a lot. So hopefully we keep this progression going, and we are able to develop the car stronger than our rivals.
Thanks both. Any more? Should we do one more? Yeah.
Carlos Miquel, Diario Marca. Question for Carlos. Is this race the proof that you can be the real alternative to these two guys this year?
I hope we can be. I think we are a bit too far at the moment to mount a proper challenge for race wins if they put everything together and they make everything perfect. But the base that we have on the car this year and the aero platform and just the car that we've put on track feels and drives a lot more normal than last year. And from here, if we offset this level of downforce, and we just keep adding downforce to this car, I think we can start getting closer to them. But we need to start doing it from now, because if not, they're going to start pushing and getting far away.
Thank you, Carlos. We will leave it there. Very well done, gentlemen. See you next week.